in the heart of the sprawling crystalline palace of Velara, where towers of iridescent quartz spiraled into violet skies and wind chimes carved from meteoric iron sang in alien harmonies. Silence fell like a blade. The grand atrium, usually filled with the murmur of diplomats and the rustle of ceremonial silk, now echoed only with the steady, defiant crunch of boots on polished obsidian. At its center stood Captain Corin Vale of the Terran Expeditionary Corps, human, weary, and clad in battered, rust-streaked armor that screamed battlefield relic rather than royal attire. He had arrived not as a conqueror, not as a diplomat, but as a hostage of circumstance, dragged before the throne of Queen Lysara of the Zirai Dominion after a skirmish gone awry on the desert moon of Kelvar. The air shimmered with tension, thick enough to choke on. Courtiers, tall, elegant beings with purple skin like twilight shadows and hair as white as frozen starlight, watched him with thinly veiled disdain. Their robes shimmered with bioluminescent threads, shifting hues with every breath, mocking his dull, scorched plating with every pulse of color. Queen Lysara sat upon the sunstone throne, carved from a single slab of captured starlight. Her posture was regal, spine straight as a laser bore, eyes like twin pools of liquid amethyst fixed upon the intruder. She was breathtakingly alien, yet undeniably regal. Her skin a deep violet, unmarred save for ceremonial scars that traced silver lines from temple to jaw, her white hair cascading in waves down her back like frozen rivers. She wore no crown, her presence was crown enough. When Corin had been shoved forward by armored Zirai guards, she had leaned back with a sigh that carried through the chamber like a disappointed wind. "Is this the famed Terran warrior?" she'd asked, voice melodic yet edged with ice. "The one who destroyed 3 of our scout skiffs and crippled our mining operations on Kelvar? He looks like he lost a war with a sandstorm, and lost badly." Laughter rippled through the court, soft, polite, but unmistakably cruel. Someone tittered about rust bucket royalty. Another whispered that Terrans must forge armor from scrap heaps and wishful thinking. Corin didn't flinch. He'd been mocked before, after the siege of Marzak 7, after the retreat from Cygnus Rift. Mockery was easier to bear than the screams of dying friends. He remained still, helmet covering his face, only his breath hissing softly through the filter. Mechanical, steady, unreadable. "You are out of your galaxy, human?" Lysara continued, rising to her full height. She stepped down from the dais, her bare feet silent on the stone. "Your kind has no treaties with us, no claim to our systems, and yet you trespass, you fight, you spill Zirai blood. Why? For credits? For glory? Or simply because you are too stubborn to know your place?" She circled him slowly, her long fingers trailing idly through the air as if inspecting a defective machine. "Your armor is pitted, scorched, held together with desperation and duct tape, I suspect. Tell me, does Terran engineering pride itself on decay? Or is this some kind of performance art?" A few more chuckles. Corin's jaw tightened inside the helmet. He remembered Kelvar, the blistering heat, the sandstorms that flayed paint off hulls, the desperate firefight where his squad had been ambushed while trying to evacuate civilians caught between warring factions. He hadn't been attacking miners. He'd been protecting refugees, mostly Zirai dissidents, who'd been branded traitors by Lysara's own enforcers. He tried to explain that during capture, but no one listened. Words meant little when surrounded by blasters. "I fought to save lives," Corin said at last, voice muffled but clear. "Not just human lives. Yours too." Lysara paused. "Yours is the language of invaders," she said coldly. "Every conqueror claims to bring salvation." "I'm no conqueror," he replied. "Just a soldier who happened to be in the wrong place with the right conscience." That earned a snort from one of the high ministers. "Conscience? A human concept. We have logic. We have honor. We have consequence." Lysara turned fully to face him now. "Then let consequence find you," she said. "You will be stripped of that pathetic shell, paraded through the city as a lesson, and then confined to the iron spire until your bones bleach in the twin suns. Perhaps then your kind will learn to stay out of Zirai space." One of the royal guards stepped forward, gloved hands reaching for Corin's helmet. Corin tensed, every muscle coiled. He was outnumbered, outgunned, outclassed, but surrendering his face felt like surrendering his soul. He'd worn this helmet through fire, vacuum, and grief. It had shielded him from shrapnel, from acid rain, from the sight of his best friend dying in his arms on Triton 4. But more than that, it hid the scars that marked him as something other than just a soldier. As the guard's fingers closed around the seal release, Corin made a choice. He raised a hand. Wait. Lasara raised an eyebrow. Do you finally understand the gravity of your position? No, Corin said. But I won't let your guard tear this off like I'm some caged beast. If you want to see my face, I'll show it myself. A ripple of surprise passed through the court. No prisoner had ever negotiated terms in the Sunstone atrium. Lasara studied him for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. Do it. With slow, deliberate movements, Corin reached up and disengaged the locking clamps of his helmet. The hiss of equalizing pressure sounded unnaturally loud. He lifted the helmet away, revealing his face to the court for the first time. Time did not stop, but it might as well have. Queen Lasara's breath caught in her throat. Her amethyst eyes widened, pupils dilating as if struck by a memory older than the palace itself. The regal mask of cold fury shattered like glass. Her lips parted, and for a heartbeat, she looked not like a queen, but like a girl who just found something she thought lost forever. Without a word, without warning, she dropped to one knee on the obsidian floor. A gasp tore through the court. Ministers stumbled back. Guards froze mid-stride, blasters half-raised. The silence that followed was not tense. It was sacred. Corin stood stunned, helmet dangling from one hand, his face bare under the atrium's prismatic lights. His features were human, broad jaw, sharp cheekbones, but it was the eyes that held them captive. One was a stormy gray, the other a deep, luminous gold. And beneath his left eye, tracing down to his jawline, ran a scar that glowed faintly, a mark not of injury, but of ancient symbiosis. The mark of the Veil Singer. You, Lasara whispered, her voice trembling, you bear the tear of Velara. Corin blinked. I don't know what that is. She rose slowly, but not to her full height. She remained bowed slightly, eyes never leaving his face. It is the sign of the lost heir, she said, her voice now thick with emotion. The child taken during the Schism Wars, when Terran smugglers raided the royal nursery and vanished into the void. The child, the oracle said, would return, cloaked in rust and silence, bearing the sky in one eye and earth in the other. She reached out, her fingers trembling, but stopped just short of touching his scar. My brother. The word hung in the air like a detonation. Corin's mind reeled. Brother? He'd been raised in a Terran foster home on Rigel 9. His parents, human, had died in a transit accident when he was 5. He'd been told nothing of his origins beyond that. The scar had always been there, glowing faintly in moonlight, drawing stares and whispers. He'd assumed it was some freak genetic anomaly. But now, I was found drifting in an escape pod, he said slowly. Alone. No records. Just me. Lasara's eyes filled with tears, silvery droplets that shimmered as they fell, vanishing before they hit the floor. The pod was launched by our nurse mother during the raid, she said. She coded its trajectory for deep space, hoping to keep you safe from both Terran mercenaries and Zerai purists who claimed half-bloods were abominations. Her voice hardened for a moment. She died protecting your secret. We mourned you as dead. For 30 cycles. 30 Earth years. Corin was 32. Suddenly, the mockery, the rusted armor, the desert battle. It all twisted into something else. His presence here wasn't coincidence. It was convergence. The court remained frozen, but not from fear now, from awe. The mark of the Veil Singer was legend, spoken only in hushed tones during blood moon ceremonies. To bear it was to carry the essence of the first Zerai queen, who'd woven starlight into the fabric of their civilization. Only direct descendants could manifest it. Lasara straightened, though her composure was still fractured by raw emotion. Rise, Corin Vale, she said, using his name as if tasting it for the first time. No, Corin XYRR Vale. You are not a prisoner. You are my brother. You are heir to the Sunstone throne. Corin's knees nearly buckled. Not from exhaustion this time, but from the weight of a truth that rewrote his entire life. He looked down at his rusted gauntlets, suddenly not symbols of decay, but of survival. Every dent, every scorch mark, every rivet held fast with wire and will. They were the armor of a prince who didn't know he was royalty. But before he could speak, before he could even process this revelation, alarms blared through the palace. A deep, resonant chime that vibrated in the bones. Red emergency lights pulsed along the ceiling. The court erupted into chaos. Rebels! Shouted a guard, rushing in. The Crimson Veil. They've breached the lower citadel. They're heading for the throne room. The Crimson Veil, a radical faction that rejected Lysara's reforms and sought to purge all impure bloodlines, including rumored Terran hybrids. They'd tried to assassinate Lysara twice before. Now they'd come in force. Lysara's expression hardened into battle readiness. She turned to Corrin, her eyes blazing. "You have a choice, brother. You can flee, claim sanctuary in the human enclaves. Or you can stand with me and fight for the throne that is yours by blood." Corrin didn't hesitate. He resealed his helmet not to hide, but to protect. Then, with a grim smile, he cracked his knuckles. "I've been fighting for strangers my whole life," he said. "Might as well fight for family." The palace shook as explosions echoed from below. Zirai warriors rushed to arm themselves, but many hesitated, glancing at Corrin with uncertainty. Was he truly royal? Could a human-born heir lead them? Lysara silenced them with a single command. "He bears the tear. That is enough." She drew her blade, a curved energy saber that hummed to life with a sound like singing glass. To the atrium's defense. What followed was chaos wrapped in courage. Corrin, despite his old armor, moved like a storm. He'd trained in zero-G combat, urban assault, desert survival, skills that translated terrifyingly well to palace warfare. He used his rusted plating to deflect plasma bolts, his knowledge of human tactics to predict rebel movements. He disarmed one insurgent with a brutal twist, used another's momentum to hurl him into a crystal pillar, and covered Lysara's flank as she dueled their commander. A hulking Zirai with cybernetic eyes and a hatred burning brighter than his plasma axe. During a lull in the fighting, as they took cover behind a fallen statue of the first matriarch, Lysara glanced at him. "You fight like a Zirai," she said, panting. "I fight like someone who's had to," he replied, reloading a scavenged pulse rifle. "But I'm learning fast." She smiled then, a real smile, warm and bright. "Good, because you're going to need to learn how to rule, too." The battle raged for hours. Reinforcements arrived, loyalist troops led by General Zyra, a fierce warrior with twin plasma whips and a voice that could crack stone. Together, they pushed the rebels back, room by room, corridor by corridor. In the final stand at the skybridge, Corrin faced the rebel leader alone. The man sneered, "Half-breed filth. The throne will never accept you." Corrin removed his helmet again, letting the mark glow defiantly. "I don't need your acceptance," he said. "I just need you out of my palace." And with a move that blended Terran judo and Zirai pressure point strikes, he ended the fight. When it was over, the palace stood wounded but intact. Smoke curled from shattered windows. The dead, loyalist and rebel alike, were gathered with solemn care. But in the grand atrium, something new was being born. Lysara stood before her court, Corrin beside her. "This day we have been tested," she declared. "But we have also been blessed. Corrin XYRR Vale is not a human invader. He is our lost prince, returned. And from this day forward, the line of Valara will no longer hide its truth. We are not pure. We are blended. We are stronger for it." The court bowed, not out of fear, but reverence. In the days that followed, Corrin walked the palace halls not as a prisoner, but as a prince. He learned their history, their songs, the meaning of the glowing scar that now felt like a birthright. Lysara taught him the old ways, while he taught her the grit of human resilience. They argued over policy, laughed over Terran jokes that didn't translate, and stood together during memorial rites for the fallen. One evening, as the twin suns set over the desert beyond the palace walls, painting the sands in gold and violet, Lysara found him on the sunstone balcony. "You could have left," she said softly. "After everything." Corrin looked out at the endless dunes, thinking of Kelvar, of the refugees he'd tried to save. "I stayed because this feels like home," he said. "Not because of the throne. Because of you." She touched his scar gently this time, and it pulsed faintly under her fingers. "Then stay," she whispered. "Not just as prince, as brother, as family." And in that moment, beneath alien stars, Corrin Vale, now Corrin XYRR Vale, knew he'd finally found where he belonged. The rust on his armor no longer symbolized decay, but the journey that led him home. The battles ahead would be many, political, cultural, perhaps even galactic, but he would face them not alone, but with a sister by his side, and a people who now called him their own. The story of the human soldier in rusted armor was over. The tale of the Zirai prince had just begun. Weeks passed, and Corrin settled into the rhythms of palace life with a quiet determination that surprised even himself. He trained with the royal guard by dawn, studied Zirai law and history by midday, and walked the palace gardens with Lasara in the violet twilight, learning the names of flowers that bloomed only under twin moons. The court, once skeptical, now watched him with cautious hope. His rusted armor had been cleaned, not polished to gleam, but preserved as a relic of his journey, and hung in the Hall of Ancestors beside the ceremonial blades of past monarchs. Yet peace, Corrin was learning, was never more than a breath away from chaos. The first twist came not with blasters or bombs, but with silence. One morning, the Oracle of the Vale, a reclusive elder who communed with the ancient star maps beneath the palace, sent an urgent summons. Her chamber was a cavern lined with living crystal that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. She stood barefoot on a mosaic of constellations, her white hair braided with threads of silver dust. Her eyes, clouded with age, fixed on Corrin with unnerving clarity. "The mark speaks," she said, voice echoing as if from deep within the planet itself. "But it lies incomplete." Lasara stiffened beside him. "What do you mean?" "The tear of Velara," the oracle continued, "is not merely a scar. It is a lock, and the key was taken during the Schism Wars, not by Terrans but by our own." She turned her gaze fully to Corrin. "You were not the only child stolen that night. There was another. A girl. Your twin." Corrin's breath stopped. Twin? All his life, he'd felt a strange emptiness, as if part of his soul had been carved away. He dreamed of a voice calling his name in a language he didn't know. Now the dream had a shape. "Where is she?" Lasara demanded. "The Crimson Veil did not act alone," the oracle said. "Their leader Varek was once High Steward to our mother. He took the girl, not to kill her, but to raise her as his own, to twist her bloodline into a weapon against the throne." Lasara paled. "Varek is dead. We executed him after the last coup." "His mind lives," the oracle whispered, "transferred into the neural core of the Iron Spire, the very prison you sentenced Corrin to. And with it, your sister." Corrin's blood ran cold. The Iron Spire wasn't just a dungeon. It was a sentient fortress, originally built as a failsafe to preserve the royal consciousness in times of extinction. But Varek had corrupted it, turning it into a prison not just of flesh, but of will. That night, Corrin couldn't sleep. He walked the silent corridors until he found the royal archives. There, buried in encrypted files, he uncovered footage from the night of the raid, grainy, frantic. A woman in a Zirai nurse's robe launching 2 pods into the void. One carried him, the other vanished into a cloaked vessel. And standing on the deck of that vessel, watching it all, was a young Varek, smiling. He showed the footage to Lasara at dawn. Her hands trembled. "If she's alive, if she's inside the spire, then she's been trapped for 30 years, raised to hate us, to believe we abandoned her. We have to get her out," Corrin said. "But the spire is locked," Lasara replied. "Only royal blood can enter, and only if the fortress recognizes you as true heir." Corrin touched his scar. "Then let's see if it remembers its own." The journey to the Iron Spire was not one of armies, but of secrets. Disguised as waste handlers, Corrin, Lasara, and General Zyra slipped through the subterranean aqueducts that fed the palace. The spire loomed ahead, a black monolith rising from a sea of crimson sand, its surface shifting like liquid metal. As they approached, the ground trembled. A voice, deep and synthetic yet laced with unmistakable malice, echoed from the walls. "Welcome, little prince," it said. "I've waited for you." The gates opened, not in invitation but in challenge. Inside, the spire was a labyrinth of memory and machine. Holograms flickered. Scenes from Corrin's childhood on Rigel 9, twisted to show neglect and cruelty. "They gave you to humans," the voice whispered. "They forgot you. But I remembered." Corrin gritted his teeth. "You stole her. You poisoned her mind." "Poison?" The voice laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "I gave her truth, that the royal line is weak, that compassion is rot, that power is the only purity." Deep in the core chamber they found her. She stood at the center of a neural web, suspended in a cocoon of light. Her skin was violet, like Lasara's, but darker, marred with glowing circuitry etched into her arms and neck. Her white hair was cropped short, sharp as blades, and her eyes, one gray, one gold, just like Corrin's, burned with fury and confusion. When she saw them, she didn't speak. She screamed, a sound that shattered glass and sent shockwaves through the chamber. The spire responded, walls shifting into defensive turrets. "Sister," Lysara called, stepping forward. We've come to take you home. Home? The girl spat. You left me to him. You let him carve my mind into a key for your throne. She gestured to the neural web. I am the spire's heart now, and it will not let you take me. Corrin stepped forward slowly, removing his helmet. My name is Corrin, he said softly. I didn't know you existed until a few days ago, but I felt you all my life. In dreams, in silence, in the space between heartbeats. She froze, her eyes locked onto his scar. A flicker of something, recognition, passed through her face. You have the tear too? We're twins, he said, taken the same night, raised by different lies. For a moment, the spire's hum softened. The neural threads around her dimmed. Varric said, you were a fake. A Terran imposter sent to destabilize the throne. I'm as much Zerai as you are, Corrin said. And as much human. And that's not weakness, it's survival. Then, from the shadows of the chamber, a hologram coalesced. Varric, not as he was in death, but as he'd been in his prime. Handsome, regal, eyes gleaming with fanaticism. Don't listen to him, my star, he said tenderly to the girl. He's been trained to seduce you with sentiment. The blood of Valara must be pure, not mongrelized by Terran sentiment. Your purity is a cage, Corrin shot back. You turned her into a weapon because you were afraid of change. Varric's image flickered. Change is decay, and decay must be purged. Suddenly, the spire's defenses reactivated. Not just turrets, but time distortions, gravity traps, illusions of falling stars. The chamber became a storm of light and pain. Lysara and Zyra fought back, but the fortress knew their moves before they made them. Corrin ran toward his sister, ignoring the plasma bolts searing past his shoulders. I don't want to fight you, he shouted. I want to know you. She raised a hand and the neural web surged. Energy arced toward him. But at the last second, she twisted it away. It struck the ceiling instead. Why? She whispered. Why would you risk yourself for someone who wants you dead? Because you're my sister, he said, standing just an arm's length away. And I've spent my life saving strangers. I won't abandon family. Tears welled in her golden eye. My name is Kayla, she said. Varric named me Kayla Vaelrin, the reborn flame. But my true name, it's lost. It's not, Lysara said, stepping forward despite the danger. Your birth name was Serial, daughter of Queen Morel, heir of the twin moons. Kayla Serial shuddered. The name seemed to unlock something deep within her. The spire groaned. Cracks spread across its core. Varric's hologram screamed in rage. You will not betray me. You are mine. I am mine, Serial said. And with a cry that echoed through the fortress, she tore herself free from the neural web. The spire collapsed inward, not in destruction, but in surrender. Varric's consciousness shattered like glass, his final scream fading into static. The walls turned inert. The lights dimmed to a soft glow. Silence. Then Serial fell to her knees. Corrin caught her before she hit the floor. She was trembling, her body racked with withdrawal from decades of neural integration. But her eyes, her beautiful, mismatched eyes, were clear. I remember, she whispered. I remember the nursery, the lullaby, the scent of moon blossom. And you held my hand as the pods launched. Corrin held her tighter. I never let go. Not really. They returned to the palace not as prisoners or rebels, but as heirs. Serial's reintegration was slow. She flinched at loud noises, distrusted kindness, and sometimes woke screaming from nightmares of wires and whispers. But Corrin stayed with her, teaching her Terran card games to distract her mind, walking with her under the stars to remind her of open skies, not enclosed cores. Lysara, for her part, dismantled the Iron Spire's AI, turning its remains into a memorial garden where light refracted through broken code like rainbows. But peace once again proved fragile. News arrived from the frontier. Terran High Command had declared Corrin a traitor. He'd vanished into Zerai space, they claimed, and now commanded alien forces. A fleet was mobilizing, ostensibly to retrieve him, but intelligence suggested they planned a full-scale invasion under the guise of rescue. Worse, whispers spread among the Zerai traditionalists. He's turning us into Terrans. He'll hand us over to their empire. Riots broke out in the lower districts. Murals of Corrin were defaced. Someone left a dead Terran insignia at the palace gate. One evening, As Corrin stood on the balcony watching smoke rise from the city, Serial joined him. She'd started wearing robes now, though still preferred the sharp lines of tactical gear underneath. "They're afraid," she said quietly. "Not of you, of change." "I'm not asking them to become human," Corrin said. "Just to see that we're not so different." She nodded. "Then show them." "How?" "Lead," she said simply. "Not as a Terran, not as a Zerai, as you." The next day, Corrin made a decision that stunned the court. He would meet the Terran fleet not with weapons but with an open channel, and he would bring Serial with him. In orbit, aboard the royal flagship Dawnweaver, he activated the universal comms. The face that appeared on screen was Admiral Voss, his former commander, a man who'd once saved his life on Marzak 7. "Corrin Vale," Voss said, voice tight. "You've gone native, I see." "I've gone home," Corrin replied. "And I'm not your enemy." "You're consorting with hostile aliens," Voss shot back. "You've abandoned your species." "I've expanded it," Corrin said. Then he stepped aside, revealing Serial. "This is my sister. She's Zerai. She's also human by blood and by right. And she's not your enemy either." Serial spoke then, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The Zerai Dominion seeks no war with Terra, but we will not be colonized. Not by your guns, not by your laws, not by your fear." Voss studied them both, his gaze lingering on their matching eyes. "You really believe this hybrid nonsense will hold?" "I believe," Corrin said, "that the future isn't about purity, it's about choice. And I choose to stand between you, not to fight, but to bridge." For a long moment Voss was silent. Then he sighed. "High Command won't like this, but I've seen enough war to know when a bridge is better than a bomb." He cut the transmission but didn't recall the fleet. The standoff lasted 3 days. On the 4th, a shuttle detached from the Terran flagship. Carried not soldiers but scientists, diplomats, and a single elderly woman. When Corrin saw her, he nearly collapsed. "Mom," he whispered. She stepped onto the Dawnweaver deck, tears in her eyes. "Not your mom," she said gently. "Dr. Elira Voss, Admiral Voss's sister. I was the xenobiologist who analyzed your pod's biosigns 30 years ago. I fought to keep you in human care, but I always knew you weren't just human." She held out a data chip. "Your real mother, the Zerai nurse, left this, hidden in the pod's lining. I never decrypted it. I waited for the right time." Back on Velara, in the Oracle's chamber, they played the recording. A young Zerai woman appeared, beautiful, terrified, holding 2 infants. "If you are hearing this," she said, voice breaking, "then you have found each other. Know this, you were never stolen. You were saved. From a war that sought to erase difference. Love each other, led together, and never let anyone tell you that your blood is divided. It is whole. It is new. It is yours." Serial wept openly. Corrin held her hand. In the months that followed, the impossible happened. The Terran fleet withdrew, not in defeat, but in truce. A cultural exchange was established. Human engineers helped rebuild the desert towns damaged in past conflicts. Zerai healers shared their symbiotic medicine with Terran colonies. And in the heart of the palace, 3 siblings, Lysara, Corrin, and Serial, ruled not as conquerors, but as weavers of a new tapestry. Corrin never took the throne. He refused it. "I'm not a king," he told Lysara. "I'm a bridge." Instead, he became High Envoy of Unity, traveling between worlds, teaching that strength lies not in sameness, but in the courage to embrace the other. And sometimes, on quiet nights, he'd sit in the palace gardens with Serial, both of them staring at the stars. Not as aliens, not as humans, but as something beautifully, defiantly in between. The rust on his armor had long since been honored, but he no longer wore it. Instead, he wore a simple pendant, 2 interlocking rings, one of Terran steel, one of Zerai crystal, forged from the wreckage of the Iron Spire and the hull of his old dropship. It wasn't an end. It was a beginning, and the galaxy, vast and ancient, finally had a new story to tell. Years flowed like the twin rivers that wound through Velara's desert heart, sometimes calm, sometimes swift, but always forward. Corrin never sought the crown, but his presence reshaped it all the same. Under the joint rule of Queen Lysara and her siblings, the Zerai Dominion entered its most vibrant era in centuries. The old fear of impurity gave way to a philosophy they called the weave, the belief that strength came not from uniformity, but from the interlacing of different threads. Human resilience, Zerai grace, desert pragmatism, starborn dreams. Corin, now known across known space as the Bridge Prince, traveled not as a soldier, but as a peacemaker. He brokered trade routes between Terran mining colonies and Zirai crystal foundries. He stood before the Galactic Concord and declared, "We are not half of anything. We are whole in our duality." His words sparked a movement. Children of mixed heritage, once hidden or shamed, now walked with pride, their hybrid features celebrated in art, song, and law. Serial, once the weapon of a dead tyrant, became the Dominion's foremost architect of neural ethics. She dismantled the last vestiges of coercive AI and rebuilt the Iron Spire's ruins into the sanctum of shared mind, a place where beings of all species could safely explore consciousness, memory, and empathy through voluntary neural communion. She never fully lost her sharp edges, but she learned to wield them with care, like a sculptor rather than a blade. And Lasara? She ruled with wisdom sharpened by loss and love. She abolished blood purity laws, opened the royal archives to all citizens, and, against centuries of tradition, named not a single heir, but a council of succession that included Corin and Serial as equal stewards of the realm. But the greatest change bloomed in the quiet spaces between grand events. One spring, during the Festival of Twin Moons, a celebration of balance and reunion, Corin found himself walking through the Moonblossom Garden with a Zirai botanist named Neris. She was brilliant, quick-witted, and had once scolded him for stepping on a rare phosphor vine during a diplomatic tour. They'd been arguing about photosynthesis ever since. Her skin was the soft violet of morning twilight, her white hair tied back with a vine that glowed faintly in response to her emotions. She never bowed to him. She challenged him, and he adored her for it. "I still think Terran tomatoes are overrated," she said, plucking a lumina-berry and offering it to him. "And I still think you've never tasted one fresh off the vine in summer rain," he countered, taking the berry. Their fingers brushed. The vine in her hair pulsed a soft pink. They married beneath the twin suns in a ceremony that blended Terran vows with Zirai resonance chants. Lasara officiated, her voice echoing through the crystalline amphitheater. Serial stood as his witness, her usual scowl softened by tears. Even Admiral Voss attended, now retired, bringing a potted tomato plant as a wedding gift. Their union was more than love, it was symbol made flesh. The first royal-human hybrid marriage in recorded history. And it was joyous, loud, and full of laughter that rang through the palace halls long into the night. Children followed, 3 in time. Talon, with Corin's storm-gray eye and Neris's violet skin, who could recite star charts before he could walk. Morel, named for their grandmother, with golden eyes that glowed when she laughed and hair that shimmered like spun moonlight. And little Joris, the surprise of their later years, who inherited Corin's rust-colored hair and a stubborn streak that made even Serial grin. They raised their children not in gilded isolation, but in a sunlit wing of the palace that opened onto gardens, classrooms, and the bustling markets of Velara City. The children played with Zirai and Terran and hybrid friends alike, their games mixing zero-gravity tag with sand racing and neural puzzle duels. Corin taught them to fix broken things. Machines, misunderstandings, hearts. Neris taught them to listen, to plants, to stars, to silence. Lasara never married, but she was never alone. She doted on her nieces and nephew, taught them statecraft through riddles, and took them on midnight rides across the dunes on her crystalline skimmer. Serial, surprisingly, became the favorite aunt who told the best ghost stories. Tales of rogue AIs and desert phantoms that always ended with, "But love rewires even the coldest code." Decades passed. Corin's armor, once rusted and battered, now rested in the Grand Hall. Not as a relic of war, but as a monument to return. Beside it stood a small bronze statue of a Terran medic handing food to a homeless Zirai girl in a desert town. A quiet nod to the unseen kindnesses that shape history. When Corin and Neris grew old, they walked the same gardens where they'd first argued about tomatoes. Their hands, wrinkled and spotted, still fit together perfectly. Their children had grown into leaders in their own right, Talon as ambassador to the Terran Coalition, Morel as head of the Sanctum of Shared Mind, Joris as a desert ecologist healing the scars of ancient wars. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and amethyst, Corin sat on their favorite bench, Neris's head on his shoulder. Lasara and Serial sat nearby, sipping starmint tea. The laughter of grandchildren echoed from the courtyard. "You ever think it would turn out like this?" Neris asked softly. Corin smiled. "I hoped, but I never dared dream it." Lasara reached over and squeezed his hand. Serial, for once, didn't say a word, just leaned against the bench, eyes closed, a rare peace on her face. And in that moment, beneath alien stars that had once seemed so distant, Corin Vale, soldier, prince, husband, father, knew he had found not just a home, but a legacy. Not built on conquest, but on compassion. Not on blood purity, but on boundless belonging. The galaxy still had its wars, its fears, its fractures. But in the heart of the Velara Palace, a new truth had taken root and flourished. That the most powerful armor was not forged from steel, but from love. That the truest royalty was not inherited, but chosen. And that sometimes, the greatest act of courage was simply removing your helmet and letting the world see your scars. And so, surrounded by family, legacy, and the quiet hum of a world at peace, Corin closed his eyes, not in death, but in deep, enduring contentment, knowing that the bridge he had become would carry generations forward into a future brighter than any star.